Welcome, everyone. I'm Kelly McFarland, your facilitator for today's webinar. This webinar is organized by Swords to Plowshares and is designed for the grantees of the California Veteran Employment Collaborative to stay informed of best practices for providing employment and training services to California veterans. This webinar is the first in a series of technical assistance webinars. It is designed to help maximize your outreach efforts to veterans seeking employment and other wraparound services. Following the presentation, we will invite open discussion with you, the participants, to talk about obstacles and solutions to reach veterans in need of employment services. Jeff Millard, our presenter for this webinar, is a policy associate with Swords to Plowshares, specializing in community education and outreach. Jeff presents Combat to Community Cultural Competency Curriculum to hiring managers, recruiters, and HR professionals, as well as other professional cohorts, including educators, attorneys, and police officers. He previously helped set up and run an SSVF program in Washington, D.C., spending almost 2 years directing outreach for the program. Jeff spent 9 years in the military, including 13 months in Iraq, and is now a service-connected disabled veteran. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in American Studies from SUNY Buffalo and is an expert in veteran policy, concentrating on macro solutions to veteran issues around homelessness and less than honorable discharges. During this webinar, you may type a question to the presenter or Swords to Plowshares staff at any time. Simply type your questions in the question box on the right side of this webinar's display. At the end of the presentation, we will review the questions asked and comments posted. For those participating signed in to this webinar using a headset or dialed in via the phone for audio, you can also ask an audio question by raising your hand. Simply raise your virtual hand by clicking the small hand icon next to your name on your webinar dashboard. Our talented technical people will enable audio for you to ask your question live. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be archived on the Swords to Plowshares website and our YouTube channel. Without further delay, please welcome our presenter, Jeff Millard.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate the introduction.
Muted.
This is going to be the first in a series of webinars for this grant, and I'm really thankful for all of our grantees for hopping on this webinar. This is the first we're doing on outreach because really outreach is where all of our work starts. It starts with good outreach. Some of the stuff I'm going to go over today are identifying who you intend to serve, materials, do's and don'ts, targeted outreach, knowing your continuum of care, and tracking and follow-up. An overview of services here at Swords. We at Swords to Plowshares think of ourselves as a comprehensive veteran service organization. So we have housing programs, both permanent and supportive, as well as traditional housing and SSVF. We have health and social services, employment and training. Where I work, we have the Institute for Veteran Policy, as well as our legal department, which handles benefits advocacy, including discharge upgrade, as well as helping veterans through the benefits process. Helping veterans is about providing an experience that improves their lives. It shouldn't be and can't be really a check-the-box type assembly line. It has to be about customer service. Veterans usually know many other veterans, and a positive experience from your clients is really the best outreach you can have. Word of mouth really works. Veterans and employers are both our consumers here in this program, and making and keeping both happy works for you as well as your clients. Stressing here that veterans are not all the same. We're not a monolith. We don't think alike. Not all veterans go through the same experiences. And so we have to also understand with that the word veteran itself is a loaded term. Women, non-combat veterans, and younger veterans tend not to self-identify with the word veteran. Each program needs to define veteran as the population that they will serve. And in your outreach, you need to be asking the correct questions. Asking if someone is a veteran is not going to give you probably the same response that you might want from all veterans. So we encourage you to ask questions like, have you ever been in the military? What branch of the military were you in? Things like that that are more open to a lot of other answers than just, are you a veteran? And given that we're not all the same, we are a very diverse population, we have very diverse needs. And so veterans, when you go to serve veterans, we need to make sure that we target the individuals that our services are really best for. Whether that's Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, women veterans, Vietnam veterans, whoever you are going to have services for, you need to make sure that we identify them and strategically target outreach towards those veterans. You always want to have materials when going to do outreach. Never expect a veteran or anyone that you're meeting with to just remember you based on your business card. Always have materials for you to leave behind. When I was running outreach for the SSVF program I worked for in Washington, D.C., I had a cart full of materials. I have the same thing today when I go to do outreach here at Swords to Plowshares. When I come back to my office after an outreach day, I reload all of our pamphlets and anything that I might have given away, but I make sure that that's already always set to go so that I don't ever even have to think about it. My materials are there. Also, you want to pre-prepare a 30-second, a 5-minute, and 20-minute, and maybe even an hour-long presentation about your program, what it is, who you serve, how to reach it, all of those types of things, so that regardless of the amount of time that you get to spend with someone in doing that outreach, you can explain exactly what your program is. Some good things on your materials. Always be very clear on what your program is, what it does, who is eligible, how to apply, and information about how to reach you. The clearer that that information can be, the better. Use good graphics and pictures. We've included a link here that you can go to actually get some pretty good pictures. If you'll notice throughout this presentation, we don't use the 1995 office graphics that look like they were drawn by a kid nowadays. We use pictures of the people that we intend to serve. And with technology as it is, you can use really good, sharp pictures. So you want to use those pictures, really good, sharp graphics when you choose to use them. Some things you want to avoid. You can avoid filling up every space. A flyer or any other material doesn't have to have every single space filled with words or pictures. Be clear and concise on the information that you want. Some other stuff you might want to avoid, a lot of flags and other typically quote-unquote patriotic imagery. These are things that a lot of people assume veterans really like, but data shows us that veterans generally don't gravitate towards those things, especially in outreach materials. Make sure that you're looking at the wording that you use. Words are really important, especially in materials like this. The military uses the term female a lot. Data shows us that women generally aren't as receptive to that term in civilian society. So using the term woman instead of female is one of those ways that you can really look at the language that you're using on your materials. Your office space. If you're going to have veterans coming into your office space, it really needs to be a safe place for them. Look around your office. Are there posters there that could trigger someone that has post-traumatic stress, whether from combat or military sexual trauma? Your staff doesn't have to be veterans. It can help in some situations, but they don't necessarily have to be. They do have to be culturally competent in what they're doing. Take a look around your office. Does it suit the needs of the veterans? If you take a look at the photo that we use here in the presentation, it's obviously a Marine in the photo. You can see the Marine flag as well as other flags on the wall, but if you're going to put one service branch, I'd recommend putting them all. This one here, you can see this Marine chose to just use the Marine Corps flag. There's some other things in here. The office looks pretty comfortable. You want a place where people can come and be a little bit comfortable and not just sitting in the typical chairs, things like that. You're going to want to look at, are your clients going to come in with kids? If they are there things for the kids to play with? There's a TV in this photo. Maybe this person could put on a DVD for the kid that might come through. So keep those things in mind. It's not just a matter of, is this environment safe and not triggering, but also, are there things to do for kids that come in? Is there an area that's going to be comfortable for your clients to wait for you? Things like that can actually be a really big customer service factor. And we're going to go to our first poll question. And Kelly, I believe, is going to take the poll questions.
Well, hi, Jeff. This is kind of fun. The first question we have that everybody should be seeing on their screen right now is, where do you currently conduct your outreach? And if the attendees could take a minute and check the box or select all that apply, we would look forward to, in the next couple of minutes, we could take a look at the results. And Jeff, where do you find, in your experience, some of the most successful outreach can happen given the choices that we have on the screen here?
Well, I think that thinking outside of the box, actually, for me, the other, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation, the other is really the places that you get the most bang for your buck. It's really personal interaction that does it. It's not necessarily putting up flyers or just being seen places, although I definitely encourage everyone to do those things. It's the person-to-person interaction that really helps. I was running the SSVF outreach out of Washington, D.C. We expanded into Virginia and Maryland. That meant that I was spending a lot of time driving out into rural Maryland, and I would sit down with a lot of social service agencies and just have conversations. I would sometimes even look at their intake and help them reevaluate their intake so they knew if they were serving veterans. So it really depends on the individuals that you're interacting with, but those interactions are really crucial to having good outreach.
Excellent, thank you. And we may be experiencing a little technical difficulty here with our poll. I'm not sure we're going to have some results. Actually, hey, there we go. We do have a bunch of results we can talk about. It looks like what you talked about just now, Jeff, is kind of holding true for our attendees, where they're talking about, depending on the type of outreach they're doing, they're seeing success across a few channels. Events being a big one, everybody can see. Online social media is a big reach, and that's really important. I know you're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Again,
yes,
VA or vet centers too, that's a great idea. So thank you very much for that, and I think if you're ready, we can take on the next few slides for you.
Excellent, thank you. We really want to talk about making sure that your outreach strategies are targeted for the population you're trying to reach. This can be as simple as understanding that if you're trying to reach out to World War II veterans, Twitter is probably not going to be the method that's going to give you the best results, right? So understanding that when you figure out who you want to serve, that's going to change the way you do outreach. So for present era veterans, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, social media is a must. You have to be on social media. Especially Facebook and Twitter can be used for micro-targeting. Same thing with Google ads, looking at LinkedIn. We'll get into more social media stuff a little bit later, but understanding that you have to have a presence on social media doing outreach to present-era veterans. Also, you have to have a presence on college campuses, especially community colleges. We'll talk about this more specifically later on, but that's a presence that you're going to have. Another place you're going to want to look is the Iraq and Afghanistan point person at the VA. They're usually referred to as the OAF/OEF person. Operation New Dawn, OND, that you see here on the slide is also an acronym you'll hear. Another place that you might want to look at, depending on what the requirements are for your program, is National Guard and Reserve bases that are nearby. I know that when I was running the SSVF outreach, National Guard members are eligible for SSVF, and so I was doing presentations at National Guard armories all the time. This is a place where present-era veterans are located, and even the ones who might not be able to get your help through there, if you can get the word out to those networks, most of those Guard and Reservists still talk to their buddies that they deployed with, things like that. If you're going to be doing outreach to women veterans, college campuses, once again, are going to be an integral part of that, especially include community college. A lot of present-era veterans are coming back and going to community colleges. take a look at the Women's Clinic at the VA, but also your local agencies, things like the local women's shelters, also your local WIC offices, your local SNAP offices, the places that all women who are looking for services are going to. Women veterans are also going to go there. And as we know that women veterans tend to self-identify with the word veteran a lot, they're also less likely to be going to more traditional veteran places, so you're going to have to think outside of the box when doing outreach to women veterans. If you do have difficulty reaching out to women veterans, we really encourage you to look up some of the organizations that might be in your area that we granted in our California Women Veterans Project. There are several on the screen, but if you want more information on that, please feel free to be in touch with us after this, and we can really do a better job of doing a warm handoff to you and someone from one of those women's organizations that are having services through this grant that we put up. It's really important to know your continuum of care. You have to know what's out in the community, because veterans often don't come to the VA for services but still go to other places. They're going to that SNAP office. They're going to the local housing office. And so you really want to have good relationships with them. Again, when I was running the program in DC, I knew all the folks at the local housing agencies, and so anytime that they had veterans come in, we redid some of their intake forms for them so they were asking the right questions, but making sure that throughout the continuum of care, everybody knew that, oh, there's a veteran who needs housing help, send them over to Jeff. That was something that was really common at that time period, and you really want to know your continuum of care and make sure that they know you as well. Street outreach. You have to, with a targeted response or targeted outreach, you have to realize who you're going to be outreaching to if you're doing street outreach. If you're doing street outreach and your target population is Vietnam vets who've been on the street for a while, that's probably a really good way to meet that target population. But if you're looking for present-era veterans, if you're looking for veterans who just might need a little bit less help than someone who might be chronically homeless, street outreach is really probably not going to be where you look. So understanding that if you're going to do street outreach, the type of population you're going to interact with. Outreaching outside the box. This is what I talked about when Kelly asked me the question earlier during the polls, and I think that this is really where you're going to see the biggest windfalls of veterans coming into your programs, is that veterans are going to welcome home events, yellow ribbon events, stand downs, happy hours. There's a lot of networking events out there for veterans. I know here in San Francisco, Vets in Tech does a happy hour, for example. So some of those happy hour events that are networking events also can make really good outreach events for you. Other things thinking outside the box, things like concerts. There's a lot of bands out there who will let you table for no cost at their concerts, and a lot of veterans are going to those shows. Going to barber shops, sporting events. You can see the picture here of some of our employees from Swords to Plowshares at a San Francisco Giants game. Sorry to anyone out there who's not a Giants fan. We have a very good relationship with the Giants here in the city of San Francisco, and so we're able to do a lot of outreach alongside of the San Francisco Giants. Looking at where family and friends are going. A lot of times veterans hear about programs because their friends and their family saw something about a program, picked up a brochure or a pamphlet about a program, and ends up going back to the veteran because their friends and family know that they're struggling, even if they won't reach out for that help themselves. The VA and the vet centers. This also I want to include here and make sure that we talk about things like the C-Box and other community-based VA facilities. Understand that vets are still going to the VA. They're still going to the vet center, and so making sure that you can get referrals from there. When I was in DC, I hate to keep bringing up my SSVF experience, but we had a great relationship with the CRRC, the Community Resource and Referral Center that the VA opened up in Washington, D.C. At one point, we were getting about 50% of our referrals just from the CRRC, because they understood what we did, and they also gave us really good referrals. So by having that good relationship with them, we made sure that we were getting the right referrals for our program and not just any veteran that was coming through the door. VSOs and County VSOs. A lot of current era vets aren't joining veterans organizations at the rate that other eras of veterans did. That's just a reality that we're dealing with. But the veterans who are in need are still going to the VSOs. So making sure that your local veteran service organizations and your county veteran service officers both know who you are, what your program is about, so that they can, again, make good referrals to you. Colleges, universities, as well as community colleges are a really great place to do outreach for younger present-era veterans. And of course, we all know that you're going to have to contact the student veteran organizations, but also think about some of the places on campus that are maybe a little bit less apparent that veterans are going to go to. The GI Bill accrediting agent. A lot of veterans using the GI Bill now. There's someone that processes that paperwork. Does that person know about you and your program? The EOP office, disability groups and offices, the LGBT offices and groups. There's a lot of groups on campuses that are nearby to you that veterans might be interacting with, even though they're not comfortable identifying with that word veteran. Again, that comes up for us, that we know that a lot of the veterans that we're targeting for this, younger era veterans, women veterans, veterans of color, are going to be involved in a lot of different organizations other than just your traditional student vets organizations. We're going to try another poll. Hopefully the technology cooperates with us this time on it. This poll is going to be about social media. Kelly, you want to jump in and facilitate us through this poll?
Absolutely. These are kind of fun. What social media platforms does everybody, do our attendees and our participants use for online outreach? And Jeff, I know that we here at Swords to Plowshares use all of the ones that are listed on the screen there pretty heavily. LinkedIn, we have found, can be a pretty powerful tool to link together other employee resource groups within companies and their veterans groups within companies, which is a very big help in getting the word out and getting volunteers and dollars into our organization. I would be very interested in hearing from the other attendees on board today's webinar how they use these tools, or how many of these do they use. Do you have one that you recommend the most, Jeff, or do you think all of them?
I think that for me personally, I think the LinkedIn groups are amazing. They're great. But so is Twitter. And I feel like Twitter doesn't get enough attention for what you can do with it. Things like tweeting at very large veteran organizations like Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. They have a huge following on Twitter. And tweeting at them, getting into that Twitter conversation with them, and being seen by those. I'm seeing in the chat here that someone brought up outreach around churches, and that's another great one. I didn't bring that up when I was talking about outside the box, but I wanted to give that that comment some consideration, because there are a lot of churches out there doing veterans work and outreach to veterans, lots of veterans going to those churches, so definitely wanted to mention that, which came up in the chat. But when we talk about social media, personally, I think Twitter doesn't get enough recognition for the things that you can do with it, in being in someone else's mentions, getting into a Twitter conversation with someone can really show you their followers what you're doing and what you're about. And so there's an echo effect to Twitter that I really like.
That's a really good point, Jeff. And as a matter of fact, the poll results are in, and I find them very interesting. It seems like our attendees and participants in our collaborative are evenly split across Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. A couple of them are using none, and we would encourage those organizations, and I'm sure, Jeff, you would too, encourage those organizations to pick at least one and use it. And it sounds to me like you would advocate for Twitter being the one. If you're going to use one, use Twitter. And then another point I'd like to make is 0% for Google+. If you have a website, from our perspective, if you have a website that helps drive traffic or inform the public about your services, Google+ might be something you want to look at. Since it's tied to Google itself, it has some benefit in moving you up the search hole when people search for your types of services. Just a little something to think about. But other than that, that's the results of our poll, and I find it very interesting. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's take a look at digital outreach. A lot of you, as we saw from that poll, do have an online presence. Hopefully those who don't will consider bringing on an online presence. But your online presence has to fit with your overall strategy and your overall outreach strategy. If you're looking to help older era veterans, you're looking to help those World War II vets, Twitter, probably not the place you're going to do it. But if you're looking at helping younger era veterans, that digital outreach has to be in line with your overall outreach strategy. Looking at social media in that. Each of these spaces has veteran-specific groups. So you want to look at, especially LinkedIn. LinkedIn has some really great veteran-specific groups. Coming to mind here in the Bay Area is Vets in Tech. They're all over that. But there's lots of other veterans groups on LinkedIn that I belong to, and you might want to look into those. But also look at what hashtags are being followed. On Twitter, there's different vets groups launch different hashtags, and by tweeting with those hashtags, you can get in on conversations and be seen by people that are following those conversations. And a lot of veterans are following those conversations on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, all of these different places. We definitely see that. One thing that I do want to mention is if you're going to be sending out things on social media, the best times to do that are Thursday through Saturday. Generally, that's where the biggest traffic gets pushed on social media because people look at it more in their off times, going towards the weekend, things like that, as opposed to traditional email, which we can talk about. Traditional email, most of us know the best time to send that is early Monday morning, so people see it when they get to work first thing on Monday morning is when people check email a lot. But email on its own isn't really an outreach tool. It's a great way to keep your supporters up to date. There are ways to use email as an outreach tool. You can purchase a list that you know is from a veterans organization and is all veterans. You can use it combined with LinkedIn and send emails to just users within a particular group of LinkedIn. So there are ways to use email as an outreach tool, but overall, it's not. Overall, email is a great way to keep your supporters abreast of your program changes, anything like that, but it's not really by itself an outreach tool. Intake. Intake, some people don't see this as outreach, but I have found over my time doing this that it's really important part of outreach. First of all, you don't want to be asking the same questions over and over again. One of the things that I hear complained about from veterans, and one of the frustrations I have with the VA, is that I'm always having to retell my story, right? Every time I go into a new office, a new visit, I'm retelling 9 years of military history of mine and 13 months of history in combat. That can be really frustrating from a customer service standpoint and can really sour someone immediately. Also, you want to be asking how they heard of you, what made them walk through the door, because that can really inform where you do outreach in the future. If you're noticing all of your people are coming in from one place, that can mean A, you might want to spend more of your resources in that area, or maybe you're spending enough resources there, you can put some resources other places. One of the other things to keep in mind about customers who are walking through the door, those veterans that are walking through the door, while they're coming to you seeking help with employment, they also might need a lot of other services, right? So whether that's legal services or help with housing or help with their GI Bill, most times if someone's coming in to you for help, they have other issues, other things on their mind. And not every organization can have all of those needs on hand. No one can, in fact. You have to have an understanding of what's in your continuum of care and how to actually get people over to the services that they need. The first step in that is obviously knowing what's in your area. There's areas where I train here in California where there's very little services there, and then there's areas like San Francisco where there's really a ton of them. So you have to know who's there, and not just know what the agencies are, but know who's there. When I was in DC, I had someone at the SNAP office, for example. I knew that if I sent Mary, a person from that needed SNAP benefits, I would send her an email, I would give this person her name and her direct phone number, she would handle that case for me. And I knew that I could depend on her. Having that one-on-one relationship with someone was really great because she also understood that if she sent someone over to me, I would take the same time and care. And having a warm handoff really makes all the difference. Not just saying, oh, you need food? Go see your SNAP benefit office. really knowing who to send people to and having that kind of relationship throughout the continuum of care makes a huge difference in customer service for our veterans. Outreach and tracking and reporting. Now, our tracking should be influencing how we do outreach. We should be tracking where are people coming from, what issues do they have, and that should really influence your outreach. And we have tracking responsibilities which are in the grant, but look at those in terms of outreach. Make sure that periodically as you're reporting to us, you're also looking at that data and saying, okay, are we reaching the right people? Should we be outreaching someplace different? Are our resources in the right place? If they are, awesome. I hope that at the first reporting, your numbers are perfect and you're doing all of the stuff that's great on outreach. When I set up our SSVF program, the first 3 months, our outreach wasn't very good, but through our tracking, we revamped it, changed how we were doing it, started doing a lot more outreach instead of directly to veterans to service agencies that were helping veterans outside of the VA, and our numbers all of a sudden started to skyrocket. These are things that because we looked at our tracking and our reporting, we were able to adjust our target for our outreach and really had much better outreach after that. So at this time, I'd really like to open it up for any questions that might be out there, anything that I might have missed, any suggestions that you have. I really want you all to be able to talk amongst yourselves and really hear what it is that you do as well.
Jeff, thanks again for that great presentation. Very informative. We do have a few questions, and I'd like to actually remind our collaborative and our participants here that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the question box, or if you're signed into this webinar using a headset or dialed in via the phone for audio, you can also ask an audio question by raising your hand. You simply raise your virtual hand by clicking the small hand icon next to your name on the webinar dashboard. So with that, Jeff, I'd like to dive right in. We had one question that came in, had to do with the section of your presentation where you talked about veterans not always identifying as veterans, and specifically regarding what's the reasoning, or do we understand why women tend to self-identify as veterans at a lesser rate, I guess would be the right word, than our male counterparts?
Excellent question. I don't think there's a lot of data on why. We definitely know that women veterans do identify with that word less. But some of the responses that I've heard from women veterans include things like, when I close my eyes and think of the word veteran, I don't see myself. I see my uncle, my father, my grandfather who fought in Vietnam, World War II. We also see that for younger veterans, that kind of explanation of why they don't consider themselves a veteran. I would also say that inside of the military, you have kind of a pecking order that gets created. Even I was in the infantry, but I didn't go out and do the kicking down the doors or patrols type thing when I was in Iraq, and I had trouble identifying with the word veteran, even though I was in the infantry and deployed to Iraq for 13 months. So there's a lot of cultural things inside of the military that are kind of pecking order type things that really can discourage a lot of people, especially women veterans, from identifying with the word veteran.
That's a really good answer, Jeff. And I know that that it does happen, and I think it would be great to understand a little bit more why. But even as our service providers understand that this is something that happens, they can work that into their outreach plan.
Exactly.
So we had another question regarding rural areas. And do you find outreach, well, I would expect the answer to this to be yes, but do you find outreach differs there than in urban areas, and how do you get over the roadblocks that come with working in those rural areas with those limited resources, reaching everybody? And
it's definitely a lot harder. When I expanded our SSVF program out into Virginia from the District of Columbia, Virginia has a lot of rural areas, and it meant that I had to change outreach strategies for those areas. For me, it meant doing a lot more of those event type things. I found myself going to Little League baseball games and talking to parents at Little League baseball games. I found myself going to whatever events that I could find in that town that we were trying to target veterans for. and talking to folks and finding out, okay, so what's going on in this town? Where can I meet some veterans here? I met with local VFW folks. I met with the county veteran service organizations, and I really listened. I spent a lot of time listening in those areas because that's not where I'm from. I am a big city guy. And so when I was going out into those rural areas, now for our providers who are there and live there on a daily basis, keep in mind some of the places that you go on a daily basis. Think outside of just the social services box. If there's not a lot of social services there, well, what are there? Where are the places that veterans are going to go? Maybe even connecting with local police departments so that veterans in crisis, as they're dealing with police have an option of bringing you in so that maybe that person can avoid jail time. Things like that were some of the things that I did in rural areas, but it is definitely a lot harder doing outreach in rural areas, and I'm really glad somebody raised that. Thank you very much.
Right on, Jeff. And we actually have a follow-up to the comment in the topic of women identifying as veterans, or women veterans identifying as self-identifying as veterans. We actually had Corey Vigil from Community Outreach, and he's a supervisor there, working Wardrobe's VetNet. He said when outreaching to women, it can be frustrating because a large amount of what he deals with is counseling, mental health, or some type of trauma. It's hard to identify the women because of the privacy and the woman not wanting to be identified as a veteran. And his question has to do with, what do you suggest when trying to outreach to women for wellness programs to an organization and or an area you know has women veterans in it? Do you have any tips or tricks?
Yeah, actually I do have a couple of tips or tricks on that one. The first one that I would talk about is avoiding the word veteran, right? Asking someone, sometimes they might not want to talk about veteran and their experience as a veteran, but asking very factual questions about their time in the military. You know, oh, you were in the military. Oh, where were you stationed? Things like that. And you can get, you don't have to talk directly to the issues of trauma. You can talk about other things about their military experience and concentrate on that. But asking those factual questions rather than feeling questions can be a good way to kind of get around that and avoid some of those areas that are very uncomfortable until you build that rapport with the veteran. As you spend more time, and don't give up just because that person maybe rejected you the first time around or didn't want to come in for services, because a veteran who doesn't want to come in for services today might really want to tomorrow. And so being open to having a veteran come back to you, or being open to going back to that veteran and letting them know that your services are still there, is a really great way of just continuing to be present, is a great way of bringing them along and bringing them into the fold. I would say, especially with women veterans, avoiding that term veteran, avoiding words like female and using words like women and woman, speaking to them just as though you would a male veteran in a lot of cases. A lot of women veterans that I talk to are frustrated when they go into the VA and the doctor thinks that they're a spouse and not the veteran. Things like that. Not making those assumptions can really go a long way. But it's not easy work, and I don't want to trivialize it in any way. It is difficult work, especially when you're dealing with anyone who's dealing with trauma. In bringing them in for services can be very difficult. Continually being there and being versed on that cultural competency will go a long way.
That's an excellent point, Jeff, and I think that more than likely creating the relationship so that they understand that those services are there, even if they choose not to use them the first couple of times you interact.
Exactly.
That's a good point. We had another question come in with regard to finding that Iraq veterans and younger veterans in general seem to just want jobs and not supportive services. They want a job quick without a lot of extensive training or supportive services. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's definitely an issue that we face. We saw that when I was running the SSVF program. And me personally, when I first got back from Iraq, I didn't want to admit that I had post-traumatic stress. I didn't want to admit that I was dealing with chronic pain issues that I would probably be dealing with the rest of my life. It's a very difficult thing to take on, especially when you first get back from a deployment. And so I would say that the answer is very similar to what we talked about with women veterans, in that making sure that they're still available. So okay, you can start helping that younger era veteran get that job. You can help move them in quickly, and then make sure that they always know that those other supportive services are always available. And asking every so often, hey, have you looked at a counseling program? I know, for me, it's easy to say something like, I know for me it was really helpful doing this counseling program when I first got home from Iraq. If you don't have that kind of experience, that's okay. Just making sure that those options are always left open for that veteran, because when they're ready, they'll be able to take advantage of it.
That's an excellent point, and Jeff, kind of ties back into an earlier part of your presentation where you talk about types of outreach, matching who you're trying to reach with your type of outreach, and something along the lines of a younger veteran. Are we finding that they do interact more on the social media of today?
Yeah, a lot of younger vets are going to interact more with social media, and so you can getting involved in that conversation, like I said, via Twitter. I know that I've just sent out stories via Twitter that I just simply retweeted and ended up in conversations with veterans all over the world, in fact, about that story. And I now have Twitter friends that I've never met in real life, but are vets from all over the world that we have conversations with now over Twitter. And there's others that was able to bring in for services when I was at SSVF. That way, you can use those ways that do create a little bit of distance and a little bit more privacy for the person interacting, because they can do it from the safety of their smartphone or from behind their computer, right. And that can lessen some of those barriers to services that we often see.
That's an excellent point, and I think one of our participants just brought up a really good point. Again, Corey, kind of tied back into even though you're using social media or you're using a face-to-face, that if you're sincere, if somebody feels like you're sincere, then they will probably respond better. In Corey's experience, a majority of veterans feel like they're numbers, that they are just numbers, and that if someone is open and caring, that they'll connect a little more. And you can do that even over social media as well.
And that goes back to my first point in talking about customer service. It really has to be a customer service experience. If someone comes in and they feel like a number, they feel like they weren't treated like a human being, if that customer service is poor, they're going to have a bad feeling about your entire agency. They're not going to feel like they were treated well, and so they're not going to speak positively about you. And so it all comes down to that customer service. Are you meeting the needs of your customer? Are you meeting the needs of the veteran? Are you meeting the needs of the employers that you're working with? And so if you look at it from that angle, and if you continue to be on our webinars through this series, I'll bring this up several times, customer service is really where that starts. And that means treating someone the way that they want to be treated, and not simply treating them as a number, not saying, oh, I'll get to you when I get to you sort of mentality. That person in your office, on your phone, on the other end of the Twitter or Facebook or any other social media, you view that person as a human being and as a customer who's there to utilize your services.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much. That is absolutely a great way, I think, to wrap this up by taking us right back to your first point in your presentation, that it's all about customer service, outreach, and taking care of your veteran customers. Jeff, thanks again for this great information. Our collaborative should feel free to contact Jeff Millard with any other questions you may have on this subject, and his email address is gmillard@stp-sf.org and is actually on the screen right now. And remember, this webinar will be archived on our website and our YouTube channel. It can be found at youtube.com/vets-helping-vets within 48 hours. That concludes today's presentation. We'd really like to thank our presenter, Jeff Millard, and you, our participants. Please note that once you exit the webinar, each of you will be prompted to complete a brief survey to evaluate this presentation. Your feedback is important to us and is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for your time. You may now disconnect.